Hello again, Year 10. So it's going to work slightly differently this week with your lessons. So this work that we're setting today, Monday, will be due in on Wednesday because we understand that some of you will be in school today, some of you will be in school tomorrow. So we'd like you to submit this by Wednesday, please. So today's lesson is just about being able to make connections between two poems. So last time you did a connection, a comparison, was between Checking Out My History and London, and a lot of the work was quite heavily scaffolded for you. So this time it's about getting you to think about things a little bit more independently and guiding you through that. So today is just about you being able to plan and prepare some key pieces of evidence to support your statements that I will provide for you. We will be going back to the work that you have done on Checking Out My History in London very briefly when we look at giving you some feedback on that. Some of you will have received feedback already, but then in terms of writing our next piece of work, you'll get even more feedback as well to help you. So for today's lesson, you'll need to have out your Storm and your Prelude work because they're the next poems we're going to be comparing. And in this lesson, you're going to spend some time thinking about the connections between those poems because they are a really good pairing. And like I've said to you before, this pairing hasn't come up in the exam ever. So it's a nature hasn't come up in the exam ever. So it's a likely comparison that you may have in the real exam. So it's a good one for us to practice. Okie dokie. So this is the next question we're going to have a look at. Okay, how is the power of nature presented in Storm on the Island and one other poem? And we're telling you to compare it to Prelude because that's what we've just studied. So please could you pause the video and just copy down that question. Okay. So this is the final piece of comparative work we're going to be doing this term, and it's of these two poems, and obviously our focus is the power of nature. That doesn't mean to say you can't talk about the hidden messages in both of the poems as well, because of course you can talk about them as a metaphor, particularly if you're going for the higher grades, but you don't have to. So today you're going to be finding the connections between the two poems. So the first thing I'd like you to do is just spend a few moments rereading both of the poems and hopefully reading through the notes that you have made for both poems as well. If you have both of those at hand, just scan through those and reread the poem. Attached to today's Show My Homework entry, you'll find a knowledge organiser for both of the poems. The knowledge organiser just tells you a little bit about the poet, about the background, the big idea to the poem. It tells you a little bit more about context. It gives you the key quotes that we made notes on and the terminology, not the notes, just the quotes and the terminology. And which poems compare well to each other. So it's useful to have a look at that as well as your own notes. So pause the video, reread the poems, and have a scan through your notes on both of the poems. Okay, so remember we're looking at a question about I should have put the question on the PowerPoint actually again. How is the power of nature presented in Storm on the Island and the Prelude? So here are the big ideas that we've got in your knowledge organiser for both of the poems, and I want you to just spend a few minutes just reading through them and seeing what big idea, what do you notice about similar between the poems? Can you think of any other similarities after rereading the poems, and can you think of any differences? So on one level, Heaney's Storm on the Island is an exploration of the power of nature and the conflict between nature and man. Wordsworth's autobiographical poem is a part of an epic poem and explores the power of nature and can be considered an allegory for self-discovery and growing up. So one thing you will obviously say is that they're both about nature being powerful. Okay, and are there any differences in that power? Have a think about it. Don't worry if you can't come up with anything yet. This is just getting your brain ticking over. And also, is there any similarities between the power of nature, and is there any differences? Are there any differences between the power of nature in each poem? It also might help you to think about the speaker in the poem. So, are there any similarities between how the speaker feels about the power of nature in both of the poems, or are they different? Are they different feelings towards the power of nature? Okay, this is just notes, just an idea overall. You don't need to talk about any quotations or anything like that, just an overall feeling about what's similar and different between the power of nature in both poems. So just pause the video and jot down any ideas now. Okay, so when we have our live lesson on Thursday, we'll probably talk a little bit more about this. So I'm not going to tell you any right answers or wrong answers. I'm sure there's a range of answers you can give, a range of ideas, but just have your own ideas ready, because this is about trying to make you a little bit more independent in the thought process. Okay. So this is the main task for today. This is what we'd like to see evidenced by Wednesday. So this grid here is helping you prepare the points and how you're going to compare points. So for this, you're going to need to use your notes that you've made from the annotations of the poems and the key quotations, and the knowledge organiser that we have attached to show my homework. So here we have some linking statements that I've prepared for you. Both poems begin in a calm way to present man's relationship with nature. Okay, and for that, what you need to do is you need to find, oops, it's my cursor gone. You need to find evidence of that for Storm on the Island, write the quote in. You'll find that on your knowledge organiser or in your notes. Write the quotation that shows that the poem Storm on the Island begins in a calm way to present man's relationship with nature. So write down that quotation from Storm and the terminology you would use to go with it. And then for the prelude, do the same. Find some quotations that show that man's relationship with nature is quite calm at the beginning of the poem, and the terminology that goes with it. If you're going for a grade 7 or above, remember to extend your paragraphs, and to get the highest marks, you'll need to use more than one piece of evidence in order to elaborate and show that you've thought about the poem as a whole. So you might want to put down more than one quotation. You won't be able to do that for every single one, because some of the statements are a little bit more limited, but you should certainly try and do that for a couple of the boxes, okay, if you're going for a grade 7 or above. Otherwise, one quotation is fine. Okay, the next statement is, as both poems develop, nature is presented as powerful and intimidating. I think we can agree on that for both of them, that nature becomes powerful and intimidating for the speaker at least. Okay, we might not find it intimidating, particularly in the prelude, but certainly Wordsworth did when he was a young boy. We need to remember that. So you need to find a quotation that proves that nature is powerful and intimidating in Storm, and nature is powerful and intimidating in the prelude. Okay, again with terminology. Again, if you're going for a grade 7 or above, try and find another quotation that proves that point. Ultimately, both poets present nature as something to be feared, something that they're scared of. The speakers are actually quite scared in the poem, and power. The reason for that is because nature is probably either violent or aggressive or imposing or monster-like, and so you need to find a quotation for Storm that shows that, and a quotation for Prelude that shows that. Again, a higher grade means more quotations with terminology. And again, if you're going, I've put this as an extension, but I actually don't see why you couldn't all do this. Because of the annotations you've already got, you could have a go at it, but you don't have to. Now, the power of nature in both of the poems can be seen as a metaphor for wider ideas. So, for example, in Storm, it is a metaphor for the troubles in Northern Ireland. So the storm represents the what it's like living in the battles and the violence that happened in the troubles of Northern Ireland. So you'd need to explain that with evidence here. So you need to find a quotation that you might use if you were talking about this metaphor. And in the prelude, it could be seen as a metaphor for how Wordsworth grows up, how he changes, how his view to nature changes, and how we understand that nature is that we're quite insignificant in comparison to nature. So you'd need to find evidence of that and how he changes and how it changes him as a metaphor for our growing understanding of the world and how nature is ultimately more powerful than we are. That could go in this box here with some evidence. This is the piece of work that we need you to have finished by Wednesday and have submitted to show my homework to your teacher. Okay, so if you have any questions about this sheet in particular, please get in touch with your teachers ahead of that day. Okay. I think that's probably going to take you the whole hour to do those things that I've talked about. But if you do want to do some more detailed planning, the thing that might save you time next week, because it's going to be next week when you're going to be writing a bit of this, you could have a go at doing this as a way of doing some detailed planning for one of the statements. So this is the first statement. I'll go back here. This is our first statement. Both poems begin in a calm way to present man's relationship with nature. So you'd put your quotations in that you've chosen for storm there and your quotations that you've chosen for prelude there. And then for that quotation, these would just be notes, by the way. It wouldn't be a full paragraph. You'd have your inferences for that quote, what you're going to zoom in on for that quote and what you're going to say about the zoom, how you can link that to context or power. So have a look at the knowledge organizer and look at context for he and his life and perhaps how you might link it there. And for 7 Up, you might also link to another quotation, and the same for prelude. So these would all be note form. And then what I'd really like you to do is think about your comparative statement. So between them, then what have you found out? Have you found out that prelude is much more something than storm? Or have you found out that storm is much more something than the prelude? Okay, I'm not going to give too much away there. So have a go at that if you want to extend your planning to help you next week, or if you've got a bit more time in your schedule, then you can have a go at that as well. But it's not, you don't have to do this if you run out of time. Okay, so we hope you enjoy your week in school, and we're really looking forward to seeing you. Different teachers will be in every day next week, and we really look forward to seeing you. But this is due in for Wednesday. Okay, thank you very much then. See you soon.